Boker Tov, everyone. In this week's Parsha, which concentrates on Yitzchak and Rivka, and then Yaakov and Esav, there is a Parsha in the middle that the Torah describes to us. That Yitzchak travels to the land of the Plishtim, probably close to what today is Gaza, and he wants to go to Egypt because there is no famine in Egypt. Well, there is a shortage of food in the land of Israel. He has a vision that the Lord tells him not to go to Egypt, that he should never leave Eretz Yisrael. He has an incident there with Avimelech, the king of the Philistines. It says that Rivka is his sister instead of his wife, and Avimelech discovers that she is his wife, and he is angry at him. He reproves him. And Yitzchak continues to live in that area. And the Torah then describes for us a strange thing. That the shepherds of Yitzchak dug wells. They found water. So there are three different incidents that are discussed. The first incident is that Avraham Avinu, Yitzchak's father, when he lived in the area of the Philistines, and he also had contact with Avimelech. Whether it's the same Avimelech or not is not certain. Avimelech was a title, like Paro is a title. But when he had lived there, Avraham dug wells. He discovered 3 wells of water. Now, the land of Israel is not known for its water supply. It's interesting, the Torah says, Mayonos, Ubeiros, Yotzi min ahar, Yotzos min ahar min abiko. There are wells and there are springs that are found, that go out by themselves from the mountains and from the valleys. But over the entire history of the land of Israel, water has been a problem. And there are Meforshim that say that it's purposely so. So we were dependent on rain. We're dependent on Yam Kinneret. So Avram dug 3 wells. He discovered water, which was a great boon, a great discovery. And the nature of Avram naturally was that the wells were not for himself alone, not only for his flocks, but for the Philistines as well. Nevertheless, when Abraham passes away, then the Philistines came and they stopped up the wells. Why would they do that? The wells benefited them. What lies behind such a self-destructive motive and behavior? So the Torah is teaching us here some of the harsh realities of life. And that is that the emotion of hatred and jealousy overrides one's own self-interest. We have the famous example, which is used, is by Shimshon HaGibor, where he says, Tomus nafshi im plishtim, which the Gemara quotes often. As long as I take the Philistines with me, I'm willing to die also. I pull the pillars of the temple down over my head because it's over their head also. So it's worth it. And that's the nature of people. It's a sad nature, it's a terrible nature, but we know that to be true. So even though the wells are of great benefit to the Philistines, they stopped them up because of their hatred for Avraham and Yitzchak. And that's what the Gemara means when it says, Sina mekalkelis as Ashura. Hatred blinds us, makes us irrational, does crazy things. We are well aware of it in our time, in our circumstances here in Israel. In World War II, excuse me, in World War II, Hitler kicked out all the Jewish scientists who ended up making nuclear bombs for the West, for America. So he got rid of Einstein and Oppenheimer and Teller, all of the Jewish, he called it Jewish science. He said he didn't want to have anything to do with it because it's Jewish science. I mean, we shudder to think what the world would look like if there would be a world left at all, if Hitler had atomic bombs. But that's an example of self-destructive hatred. I don't have anything to do with it. So therefore, even though it's in my own self-interest, I oppose it. So that is one of the lessons of the Torah here about the wells. And it's something that we should be well aware of. Well, it's a bad pun, but we should be aware of because of the fact that it's a natural thing that human beings do. There's a second point here. There's a second series of wells. The second series of wells are wells that Yitzchak dug. New wells that didn't exist before. So there also the Torah tells us that on the first well that he dug, the Philistines disputed it. They said, Lonu amoyim, no, the water is ours. You have no right to dig wells here. So it says that it was called Asek. Kishom hisasku imo. Because there did they argue with him to take the well away. So he dug a second well. And and they quarreled about that well also. And that was called Sitna. Sitna in Hebrew is like the Satan, like Satan. It's hatred, it's things that are perverted. They argued against that too. So he moved on and he dug a third well. And he called it Rehovot. And that well, they didn't argue against. And so then Yitzchak said, well, if we have that well, then we'll be able, Ufarinu ba'aretz, we'll be successful here, we'll live. The Ramban says here a whole essay that he has on what the wells represent. Again, it's based on the principle of Masei Ovo Siman Labonim, that when the Torah tells us these narratives of what happened to our forefathers and to our mothers, the Torah is not telling us past history as much as the Torah is telling us current events and the future, how the Jewish people will look later. So the Ramban says, the first well that he dug, the wells, he said, are representative of the Beit HaMikdash. It's the wellspring of spirituality, of holiness. So the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, said Asek, because the Jewish kingdom split into two. Because the Jewish people, there were two Israels, which spelled the doom of what was going to come. He said the second well, Sitna, represented the second Beit HaMikdash. So there it didn't split into two. There was a central government, but there was Sinat Chinam. So that well also was destroyed. He said the third well, Rehovot, that will be the third temple. That'll be the Beit HaMikdash that will be built, and that no one will argue about. And then, Ufarinu ba'aretz, and then we'll be able to be successful finally to live in peace here in the country. So that's how the Ramban saw the wells. Not as so much dealing with Avraham and Yitzchak as dealing with the future of the Jewish people. Because the Ramban and all the Meforshim are troubled. Why in the world should the Torah, in the middle of telling us about Yaakov and Esav, and insert this story that apparently has nothing to do with anything? Digging wells, who cares? He dug a well, he didn't dig a well. So the first insight that I discussed with you was the nature of self-destructive hatred that the Torah wants us to be aware of. The second is the Torah is telling us about the future. There will be wells that the Jewish people dig, but they will not remain our wells. So the two primary wells were the Batei Migdash, the Bayis Rishon and the Bayis Sheni. But we can expand that to include all the wells that the Jewish people have dug over our long exile, and none of which remain in our possession. You know, and on Tisha B'Av in Chicago, so the Orthodox community organizes a tour. It's a tour of the old Jewish neighborhood, the old West Side, where there were 42 Orthodox synagogues. Everyone is destroyed. And those were magnificent buildings. I mean, you're talking, and 42 of them, to rebuild them today, you're talking billions, not even millions. It's all gone. Jewish people are a museum piece in Europe. The wells are stopped up. So the only well that he built, that remained is Rechovot Ufarinu Ba'aretz. So that will be the will that will sustain us. There's a seventh well that he dug in Beersheba. So Beersheba became, originally it was called Beersheba Gishom Nishbiu Shneim, because they took an oath there, Avraham and Avimelech. But now it was named Beersheba for a different reason, because it had 7 wells. The 7 wells that we have discussed. The 3 wells of Avraham, the 3 wells that Yitzchak dug, and the 7th well is Beersheba. This well in Beersheba is famous in military history. In World War I, when the British Army attempted to conquer Palestine, the Turks had a very strong defense line just north of Gaza. And there were 2 battles in Gaza, and the British lost them both. Now, you have to imagine what would our world look like if the Turks still owned Palestine, so to speak. If you would not have had the British and the Mandate and all the Balfour and everything else in the middle. I mean, you have to see the hashgacha here, otherwise you're blind. So the Turks won those 2 battles. So the British General Allenby said, we'll outflank the Turks. We're not going to go up the coast anymore because the defenses are too strong. If we're going to go inland, we're going to go through the desert, through the Negev desert, up towards Jerusalem. We're not through the coast anymore. The only problem is that in 1917, the British Army was dependent on horses yet. It wasn't mechanized. And there was especially an Australian division of horsemen, of cavalry. And their task was to capture the well at Beersheba. Because by capturing the well at Beersheba, there would be water. If there be water, so then the flanking attack could be successful. There's a whole literature about it. There was a movie that was made here in Israel about it. The Australian light cavalry capturing the well at Beersheba. That's Yitzchak's well. And it proved the turning point. So there are wells that we dig that aren't ours. Either because somebody stops them up, they're so self-destructive, or there are wells that we dig that aren't ours because others take them from us. But there's a well that's ours. The Rechovot, Beersheba, those are our wells. So, Farinu Boretz. You got some time yet?
Yeah.
There's a third idea. I mean, if I came, I should unload all of it, right? It says that Yitzchak called the wells, he redug the wells of Avraham Avinu again. Vayikra lahem shemos kashemos asher kora lahem Avraham Aviv. He renamed the wells with the same name that Avraham Avinu had given the wells. What is the import in that? Who cares what name he gave it? And why does the Torah tell us, especially that he used only the names that his father Abraham had used in giving them to the wells. So again, the value, these are all value decisions that the Torah is telling us. He gave them the same names because every time you said the name of the well, you remembered Avraham, Yitzchak, you remembered the connection. Names are triggers for our memory. And that's why throughout the ages, Jews always were fixated on names, personal names. I mean, the Ashkenazim have the custom of naming children after deceased relatives. Why do they do that? Because emotionally, it's a connection. If I have my Zayda's names, and then my Zayda's here too. The Sephardim even name after living relatives, but for the same reason. The part of our modern society is that, to a certain extent, a section of the Jewish people has gone away from that. But names are important. And you'll see that, for instance, great Gaonim and Poskim were known by the name of the city that they lived in. Nobody even knows their personal name. You know, you say the Berzhaner Rav, so he's the Marsham. But nobody knows who he is, but we know he's the Berzhaner. He was the Rav Berzhan. And if you were called Prager or Prager, you came from Prague. And hundreds of other such things which always were part of the Jewish culture, so to speak. To remember the names. Because the names tell us where we have been. So there are Jews that are called Berliner, there are Jews that are called Englander, there are Jews that are called Francois. There are all sorts of places. The names carry us through our story. And Yitzchak wanted that not only the wells should be refreshed and dug up again, but that the memory should be there. This is the well of Avraham Avinu. You see, what's the name? It's the same name. So that value is also emphasized for us in this story regarding the wells. To make us realize that there are many triggers to our emotions and our memory and to our tradition. And that they are all important because together they make up the story. They tell us who we are. And if we don't, so to speak, know the details, but at least the names will give us the general outline. They'll give us a sense of where we are and where we came from. So this Parsha, which is inserted in the middle, the Mefarshim say this Parsha is the difference between Yaakov and Esav. Esav's not interested in digging wells. Esav's not interested in the names of his grandfathers. That's not his business. Esav's on the hunt. And Yaakov, it says, Ishtom Yoshev Oholim. He dwells in the tents. Which tent does he dwell in? The tent of his father, his grandfather, of those that went before him. he, so to speak, is never alone. Esav is always alone in the world. Esav, they both live in a dangerous world. But Esav says, "Hinei anochi olech lomus, lomaz zeh libchora." I will not survive this world. And Yaakov, in spite of all of the challenges, says this world is mine, and I'll be able to achieve in it. So those are some of the ideas in the Parsha this week, and it's a very, very important Parsha, and I hope that you all stay dry and warm, and we should have a good Shabbos and a good Chodesh, and thank you for waiting.